Hello everyone, welcome to today's Hangout on Air, Hangouts Beyond the Conference Call. My name is Christina Mondini. I'm a community manager on our Google Enterprise Google Enterprise customer team. I'm here with Joe AbiDaoud from Hudbay Minerals. He's the Chief Information Officer. Also Adam Swidler, who's our Google Apps strategist. So today we're going to go forth and and Adam's going to start with an introduction into Hangouts. Then we'll move on to asking Joe a couple of questions so we can learn about his environment and how they use Hangouts. And just as a reminder, we'll be answering your questions live towards the end of the broadcast. And to participate in the live Q&A, go ahead and click on the blue Q&A button on your screen and enter questions and up-level other people's questions that you like. Just as a reminder, we will not be answering any questions regarding the product roadmap. And with that, go ahead and take it away, Adam.
Great, thanks very much, Christina. Happy to be here again with you. And Joe, thanks very much for joining us today. Before we get into kind of the fireside chat with Joe, we wanted to highlight a little bit of information and some of the details about why we're so excited about Hangouts here at Google. The first slide that we have here is some data for you. I think this kind of gets to the trends that are going on in the workplace and why Hangouts is poised, I think, to have such an impact. There's an increasing amount of work that's getting done outside of the office. There's a study that we looked at that showed 43%, I think this is by the year 2015, 43% of US workers are not expected to be in the office on a regular basis. And of course, this is being supported and driven by all of the new people that are joining the workforce that are just fundamentally growing up in an age where communication occurs wherever they are, kind of regardless of their environment, of course, on their mobile devices most typically. And then in kind of the seminal study around communication, we learned that over 65% of communication is in fact nonverbal. And now that we have a great platform to conduct face-to-face, if you will, interactions over Hangouts, we can really take advantage of all that nonverbal communication. Go ahead to the next slide, Christina. I think one of the things that's interesting that's going on right now is that we're all walking around with smartphones in our pocket. I'm a huge fan of my Moto X, but in our family we're a multi-platform family, so my wife has her iPhone. So we all walk around with these things, but increasingly we still use our desk phones, right? When I go to a lot of our customer sites, I still see a tremendous amount of stuff going on the phone. And that's one of the reasons why I think, again, we're so excited about the opportunity that Hangouts represents. Next slide. Now, for a lot of our customers, they do have some amount of video conferencing deployed within their organization, but it's typically very, very expensive and really limited in the reach that it gets within the organization. Usually it's only senior management and leadership that gets access to these tools. And so you've only got about 5% of the population of users that are able to access this video conferencing stuff. And if you've ever been involved in any of that stuff, you know that it's absurdly complex, right? You typically need like an IT person to help you get that call going. There's all the time and rigmarole spent at the beginning of the call getting it up and running. And Hangouts is something that you should look at as more than just a potential lower cost replacement for this technology. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Hangouts is going to give you the opportunity to push video out to every corner of your organization and engage the other 95% that right now has no access to it. And again, one of the beautiful things is that virtually everyone is walking around with a video conference hardware setup in their pocket these days. So if we go to the next slide, you can look at it from both a cost-saving standpoint and a productivity and collaboration benefit standpoint. From the cost-saving standpoint, we, in our research, hear that audio conference calls between 5 and 10 cents per minute per user. And so we're talking to lots of organizations that are paying tens of thousands of dollars a month for audio conference calls. Again, the traditional video conference stuff, the higher-end stuff, very, very expensive to set up those rooms with all the equipment that you need. And then web conferencing is another area where we're starting to see more use of Hangouts and definitely have an opportunity to help with cost savings in those areas as well. And then Google Hangouts, I somewhat jokingly said it's approximately $0 because of course it's included in the Google Apps Suite, right? So for $50 per user per year, US dollars, you get the full suite of applications, including Hangouts. And so the more your users take advantage of Hangouts over something like an audio conference call, the closer you get to sort of a $0 cost on these things. So tremendous cost savings and benefits there. So that kind of sets the stage, I think, for why we're so excited at Google about what we're doing with Hangouts. And I was in Toronto a few weeks ago, and I met with Joe in his office, and I was really excited to hear about some of the things that he was doing. And so I'm happy to have him join us today. Joe, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your company and yourself?
Yeah, no, great. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. So Hudbay Minerals, we're an integrated mining company. We specialize in the exploration, the development, and the operation of, base and precious metals. We operate in the Americas. We're primarily in Canada and South America, and have a small footprint in the U.S. Roughly about right now, we're probably somewhere around 5,000 employees in various locations.
Terrific. And tell us what your role there is, Joe.
So I'm the Chief Information Officer, as you mentioned. I'm obviously responsible for information technology. So everything from operations day to day, keep the lights on, to trying to introduce new technology, new capabilities into the business, into the space of mining. A lot of challenges that obviously come with that. We operate in very remote areas where sometimes infrastructure tends to be scarce. But one of the things we've been doing probably since early 2012 is we've been pushing a lot of things into the cloud, and that's where Google came in at that point.
Fantastic. Maybe you could start, just sort of set the overall stage by telling us a little bit about how you guys made the decision to move to Google Apps and what that was like.
Yeah, it wasn't a difficult decision. In fact, back as I mentioned, two to 3 years ago, strategically we realized that our business was going to expand. We were going to go from just being primarily a Canadian company to now expanding into South America, where there's multi-language. We're going to become a very geographically diverse organization, and we were going to grow very quickly. The cloud philosophy lends itself well to to IT organizations that want to be agile, want to be able to scale up and down fairly quickly, and without having to add a whole lot of complexity into your infrastructure. So, the cloud strategy really started with Google. It hasn't ended there, but it definitely started with Google. And we looked at obvious services, things like, basic productivity services like, email and chat and video, things that were very traditionally in the office environment, in the workstation, locally installed on people's machines, to then going into a more of a cloud-based environment. And when we looked at it back in 2012, Google was obviously the leader in that space at the time, and the integration of Google into the Hudbay environment as we moved into South America made it very seamless.
So let's dig a little bit deeper into how you, in your organization, were communicating before the deployment of Google Apps, and in particular, what you guys are starting to see with Hangouts and how you're using it.
Yeah. So when I arrived at Hudbay, the communication, or the sort of the collaboration, if you want to call it collaboration, was very traditional. People would physically fly from location to location. The only thing they had was phones. People didn't use instant messaging of any sort. Definitely not in the enterprise. They might have used it in the personal lives, but it wasn't widely used in the enterprise. There was no video conferencing capability at all. And so when I came in 2010, so a couple of years prior to Google, obviously, you start looking at traditional video conferencing equipment to try to cut things down, like travel costs, improve the user experience for meetings and things like that. But that's very costly to do. If anybody's ever deployed like a Tandberg or a Polycom or any one of those high-end video conferencing units, you're into the tens of thousands of dollars just to do it for one. So we only could do it for select few locations, very expensive to maintain. But then as we started to move over into the Google space, what you'll notice is that with Google Hangouts and with with instant messaging and chat and Google Talk and all of those things nicely integrated with your calendar and your mail and so forth, you can then begin to deploy that capability to every end user. And it doesn't necessarily have to be confined to a boardroom or a meeting room. it's now available on their mobile device, on a desktop, and it is also now available actually with Chromebox for meetings in the conference room as well. And so what's really happening now, at least what I see is happening, is the world that we live in now. If anybody's used things like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with mobile apps like Tango or Skype or BlackBerry Messenger or anything like that. Video calling and video chatting now with 4G and those types of speeds and bandwidth capabilities are now becoming more common. And video calling, I think, is going to become more common in the workplace, but it's not going to look exactly like it looks like in your personal space. People want to do things like screen share, presentations, and stuff like that, record meetings and so forth. So you're starting to see a merging of a lot of those social utilities with a lot of the business utilities that exist in the space. And one of the things we've been doing a lot with Hangouts is we've been leveraging it in that way, and that's why I think the adoption of it is picking up quite nicely.
Fantastic. Because you guys are operating in sort of a truly long-distance global operation, share with us a little bit some of the stuff you told me when I was in your office, or even just some of the more recent things that have happened that you've used Hangouts for, and maybe we can benefit a little bit from envisioning how you guys are using it in a specific use case.
Yeah, we've used it different ways. It all depends on people's work styles and how they choose to collaborate. Obviously, some people still are camera shy and don't like video, but we've actually had a lot of success with it. In fact, 2 days ago we had a SOX control meeting with the entire IT department. We had 11 participants from people in Lima, Peru, up in the Andes Mountains of Peru, and northern Manitoba, and in Toronto, all convene from either, some people were at their workstations, some people were in conference rooms. So it was a very casual meeting that happened with very little infrastructure, really required no software deployment. It was very easy to do, and it improves the whole meeting experience just in general. And I thought that that was something that we couldn't do before, not easily anyway. The other things that I'd like to see happening is we've got situations with an example would be our underground mine in northern Manitoba is a mile deep, and it takes you quite a while to get down there. If you've got an issue with a piece of machinery that you're working with, and the guy that understands that piece of equipment happens to be on the surface, well, you can point your mobile phone to that piece of equipment using a Google Hangout, and they could help you kind of triage or troubleshoot it. So those are some of the applications that could apply in our space. Are those being done every day? Probably not. But I mean, how well can they get connections underground? Well, we have internet connection availability that exists, but again, that all depends on your local infrastructure and what your limitations are.
Great. What have you seen in terms of the use of the traditional audio conference call in your organization? Are you seeing that declining a bit as Hangouts replaces some of that?
It has declined a bit. I don't have actually any usage statistics here. I can just tell you from the people that I interact with, Hangouts is slowly becoming more of the platform of choice for communication versus traditional audio, especially internally within the organization. I would say there's probably audio bridges used, definitely being used, for a lot of external calls with with other companies and things of that nature. But definitely internally, it's becoming more and more adopted.
And just from your experience, I know sometimes it's hard for us to describe to people like why it's more valuable to have that face-to-face interaction. Let me get some of your sort of thoughts on why that face-to-face is so much more compelling than just hearing a voice over the phone.
Well, I mean, step out of the business world for a sec. I mean, just go into your personal life, right? I mean, anyone that's got a mobile phone, I'm pretty sure that has kids or teenagers, most likely has some sort of mobile video app on their phone. It could be Viber, Tango, Skype, Hangouts. It could be whatever, and this is something that's been around for quite some time. The reason why it hasn't taken off so well is just because bandwidth hasn't really caught up, and it's caught up now, and we're seeing that people are choosing to do video calls over audio calls more so than ever, and it's just naturally making its way into sort of the business world. So I just think, just like the consumerization of IT happened, 4 or 5 years ago, with mobile devices and BYOD and all that sort of stuff started to come in, and social. Again, video is just another way of coming to the enterprise. And so, again, you can't beat a face-to-face call. Like you said, there's a lot of communication that's nonverbal, and I think that's always going to be the case.
Great. I want to remind people that are on the audience, you can submit questions through the Q&A app that's part of the Hangout platform that we're using today. So we've got a couple that have been coming in. Encourage you guys to keep those coming. One question in particular, and an area that I wanted to dive into a little bit more. I know when I was in your office a couple weeks ago, I think you guys had just gotten your first Chromebox for Meetings device. So tell me a little bit about how that, sort of early work with that has been, and maybe some of your plans for the future on that.
No, I'd be happy to. I mentioned earlier, the traditional video conferencing equipment is quite costly. It's quite expensive. Requires a little bit more complexity to deploy. So with Chromebox, what we've done is, we initially purchased 8 units. We sent 3 down to Peru. We sent 3 up to our mine site up in northern Manitoba, and we kept 2 in the corporate office. And what that's allowed us to do is that's allowed us to deploy video conferencing capability in a meeting room, where we normally, would have, cost us, 10 times as much to do so. What that does is that allows people to join a Hangout from a meeting room, as well as from their mobile device, as well from their workstation. And I mentioned earlier, we had 11 participants in a SOX meeting. Some of those people were in one of those Chromebox meeting rooms. Others were at their workstation. One gentleman was actually, over, I think, his tablet on a Wi-Fi connection. The Chromebox is easy to deploy. I'm sure you guys can do the sales pitch and tell people all about it. But it's pretty much like installing a video game console. I mean, if you ever taken a video game console home and you plugged it into your TV, I mean, that's pretty much it. It's probably easier than that. You can do it over Wi-Fi, so you're not having to run a bunch of cabling if you don't have to. And what's nice is it integrates nicely with the Google Calendar and the whole platform. So it's really plug and play.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Since you gave me the opening, just for those of you that haven't heard about Chromebox for Meetings, this is a very low-cost, sort of all-in-one package that you can purchase, roughly $1,000 US for the cost. It comes with a custom-configured Chromebox. It comes with a really, I think, high-quality combination of microphone and speaker. Comes with a remote, comes with a camera. Basically, all you need to do is provide a display in the room, and that room can become a video conference room that is then sort of plugged into the whole Hangouts infrastructure. And so we really see a great opportunity to create a lot of low-cost entry endpoints in these conference rooms and extend the reach of the Hangout platform through that mechanism. We wanted to focus a lot on Hangouts for this session, but obviously there are other portions of the app's platform, such as Drive and the collaborative documents and stuff like that. So Joe, let me just ask you to talk a little bit about some of the things that you guys are doing with those tools.
Sure. Drive, Google Drive, for those of you that are familiar with it, again, that was a capability that did not exist before in the enterprise. People started to pick up on cloud storage around the time we were implementing Google. We knew we needed to be able to provide that flexibility, and the way, without getting too technical, the way we've sort of architected the environment really allows anybody to come in with an internet connection. You don't require a VPN or anything like that, and so you can access your files again from your mobile device, from your computer, from a friend's computer, anywhere where you can connect to the web. So Google Drive has been tremendous for us in terms of being able to share documents, and the way we collaborate on documents. It's changed quite a bit.
Great. And now we're ready for some of our live Q&A. And our first question is about, Joe, who in your organization uses Hangouts currently? Which departments and what type of roles?
The finance department, definitely. Our CFO is a big user of it, so he brings in his other VPs and CFOs from all over, and they have their monthly calls using Hangouts. I obviously use it quite frequently. People at the mine sites use it mostly in the operations areas, logistics. We have a resource that sits in Colombia and supports our logistics group up in northern Manitoba, and so they use Google Hangouts quite a bit to go back and forth with. So I would say that Google Hangouts has still a long way to go in terms of adoption, but we're seeing it pick up.
Okay, great. This is from Justin. How do you see things like Hangouts and smartphones impacting your strategies for investments in telecommunication and phone systems in the next several years?
That's a great question. I think it's going to have a significant impact. I mentioned earlier that we went and bought 8 Chromebox for meeting, and it was 1/10 of the cost of a traditional video conferencing unit from Cisco or Polycom. It's definitely disruptive. Technology like that is disruptive. What's nice about technology like that, and what we're seeing, at least what I'm seeing users want, and this isn't anything new, but everybody wants it to be integrated. And people don't want 10 different applications kind of running, and you have an IT guy trying to figure out how everything kind of works together. What's nice about the Google platform, and other vendors will also claim this, is that all of the products just integrate well together. I mean, Google Hangouts works with Google Drive, works with Google Mail, works with Google Calendar. You don't really have to do anything to make it work. Once you're on the platform, it's quite seamless. So I think, as that integration becomes more and more important, or more at the center of how people want to work, everybody wants everything to be integrated. It's going to become more and more difficult for those one-off players that are only specializing in maybe one aspect, or they might be just the best of breed in one area to really compete. For example, one of the things we're seeing Google Hangouts beginning to compete with is WebEx, right, and GoToMeeting. So it's not there yet in terms of all the enterprise capability, but it's getting there. And what's nice about it is, it comes, like you said, with the subscription. It's integrated with my calendar. It's integrated with my mail. It's integrated with my Drive. But today, if I want to use WebEx, I have my own email system. I have my own So, the ability to begin to integrate these products really, draws a lot of cost effectiveness, right? It creates I would think, a more seamless, user environment, and most of my users would probably agree with that. So yeah, to answer your question, I mean, I know it was a long-winded answer, but it definitely makes you start to think about how you begin to invest down the road. Obviously, we've got those old video conferencing units. That's a sunken cost. We're not going to rip them out and throw them away. We're still going to continue to use them. But I think the growth going forward is now pointing into more technology like the Chromebox for meetings.
That's great. We actually had a question come in from Maurizio about what kind of hardware do you use in the conference room to enable Hangouts. And I think, just to, again, clarify, the Chromebox for meetings is all the hardware you need in a box except for the display that allows you to create a video conference room out of what would previously could be thought of as a dark conference room, right? Because it didn't have video connection. So one of the things that we saw when we talked to our customers as we were thinking about how to push that aspect of the Hangout usage was that there's lots of conference rooms that already have a projector in them, right? Because they're used to people coming in and plugging in their laptop or their device and presenting the slides or whatever. So a great opportunity with Chromebox for meetings. Again, very low cost. I think it's about $1,000 total. The first $750 is the cost of the device, and then there's a $250 per year sort of annual service fee. But again, as Joe pointed out, I mean, that is on the order of 1/10 of the cost of your typical video conferencing setups, and makes it, I think, really easy for organizations to 10x the number of conference rooms that they have connected and make them into video conference rooms. So Maurizio, thanks for that question. Christina, what else do we have coming in?
From Carolyn, again, we have, has your training department started using Hangouts to deliver internal trainings?
No, they have not. And the reason being is that it's typically the type of training we have, which is, majority of the training happens at the mine site, things that are related to working underground and stuff like that. Many of those individuals are contractors or laborers, and they don't necessarily have computers. So we have facilities locally on site, but one of the things we were able to do when we actually went live with Google for the people that did have Google is we did conduct training sessions using Hangouts.
Okay.
That's great. There's what I think is kind of an interesting question here from Mike coming in that says, when do you think Hangouts will be natural and commonplace, not a scheduled meeting, but as natural as picking up the phone?
That's a great question, and I think again it's to the point I was talking about earlier, where you're seeing it more in your personal life than you are in the business world. It is actually fairly casual now. For example, because it's integrated with your chat, and your chat obviously has presence integrated with it. One of my guys out in northern Manitoba, or even one of my guys in Peru, I'll literally send a message saying, "Look, can you chat? Can you hang out?" And they'll say yes, and then we'll just click the video camera icon, and boom, we're there. So here for me, it's become a very casual form of communication. In fact, it was that way before we got Chromebox for meetings. So it started off very casual, and what the Chromebox meetings has allowed us to do is just structure it more meeting-like, more scheduled-like than you would normally have, with the traditional kind of meeting setup.
Great.
Okay. We have a question from Damon. He's asking, have you noticed a measurable increase in productivity after adopting Google Hangouts?
I would say, just from observation, I have noticed that. I've noticed that the adoption. What the adoption has really allowed people to do is, it's really allowed people to kind of communicate. I would say more. I want to say more effectively, but that's not necessarily being fair, because there are people that don't use it that will argue that, hey, I communicate effectively too. Again, what it comes down to people's style. And I didn't talk about this before because it wasn't I could spend a whole hour on it. But one of the things I learned to appreciate when we migrated over to Google and we went into the cloud, I personally project managed the change management component of this, because I realized how personal everybody's workspace is to them. And people, what you'll appreciate about people is how unique everybody is in how they work. How unique people are when they use things like email, or when they use things like spreadsheets, or any sort of collaboration tool. So I think when you talk about people's productivity, some people tell you I'm very productive and I don't use it. So I think it's helped my productivity and my team's productivity, and the finance group will say the same thing, and other people in the organization will say the same thing. But again, it comes down to your work style and your preference. And I just think that if you look in your personal life, if you've got kids or teenagers, or you're going to see that it's just a natural evolution of the way we are beginning to work and beginning to collaborate. It's interesting. You put up, I think, Adam, a statistic that said something like 43% of workers are not going to be in the office on a regular basis. There's one statistic that I believe, which hasn't been measured, and I think 100% of the workforce is going to be expected to be able to connect at any given point in time. Right, so you work, I work, whatever our regular normal shift is, 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or 8 to 6 or whatever. But the reality is, we work all the time. I mean, if you've got a mobile device and you've got internet connectivity, believe it or not, you're working all the time. Unless you turn it off and you're in the pool or you're in the shower or you're in the beach, or where you just can't. But the reality is, 100% of us are going to have to be able to work at any given point in time.
Yeah, I think that's very true. You mentioned in the middle of your comments there a little bit about your creating a personal workspace. Joe, would you mind showing us one of your favorite Google Hangout effects as we wrap up here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things we do, this is sort of to let people know when you're kind of bored in a meeting, is we begin to do a little bit of fun stuff like this, and just to crack some jokes and to do things, add a little bit of facial hair, stuff like that, just to make it sort of comical, I guess. And it is Friday,
alter
so
ego.
Yeah, we can kind of do things like that on Friday, so you get away with it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Sometimes when I talk to enterprise customers and they see that kind of stuff and they say, "Oh, that's not professional, that's not corporate." And I think here at Google we take a very different approach, which is that it certainly can be part of your corporate culture, and you can bring these sort of fun and whimsical things. Obviously, they have their place in content.
Yeah, there's a time and place for everything.
Exactly, exactly. Well, I think we're sort of at the end of our time. Joe, I want to thank you very much for joining us. And Christina, I know you had a few closing remarks that you wanted to make.
I did. Thank you, everyone, for joining us live, and for everyone watching the recording. Adam, as always, thank you for being here. We are very excited to announce our next Hanging on Air is going to be June 17th. Ever wonder how these gas stations get fixed? Well, we'll show you how. Join us on June 17th to hear about how Oscar W. Larson uses Hangouts and Drives to fix these stations. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We'll post a recap post in the next couple of days answering the question we didn't get to. Thanks.